Good evening. My name is Constance, and I want to welcome you to tonight's Remarkable Journeys program. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. Before I introduce our guest speaker, I want to let you know that after the program, there will be time for a question and answer. And in order to do that, if you click on the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen, you can type in any questions, and feel free to do that throughout the program. And then at the very end, I will open that up, and I can ask the questions, and Sasha will be happy to answer any questions that you've got. So tonight I want to welcome Sasha Paulsen. Each year, the gray whales return to Magdalena Bay in southern Baja, where the babies will be born before heading to Alaska with their mothers. Tonight's guest, Sasha Paulsen, sailed the National Geographic Sea Bird with travel host Sven Lindblad as he mapped out an itinerary that would visit the gray whales and explore the wild beauty of Baja California. So I'm going to turn this over to Sasha, and welcome, and we're looking forward to seeing your presentation.
Well, thank you, Constance. I'm very, very honored to be here tonight. And before I start talking about whales, I just want to acknowledge both your help and the help of my daughter Ariel, who managed to put together the PowerPoint for me because I'm technologically clueless. When the library first asked me to do this, it was going to be a year ago. It was going to be April 16th. Of course, April 16th, everything was shut down and this was delayed. And then Stefania Premuk at the library said, would you be willing to do a Zoom presentation? And I said, oh, sure, why not? Not realizing that I hadn't a clue how to do it. I did create what I thought was a PowerPoint, which no one else could open. And at this point, I turned to my technological advisor and daughter, Ariel, who is responsible for your being able to see anything. The funny thing is, Ariel is a linguist, and her specialty is Welsh. And so when I mentioned we were doing a program on whales, people thought it was the little country next to England, and were very surprised that it was actually about the big mammals, but it's just about the mammals. Anyway, so it's March now, and if you head over to the coast, Bodega, Mendocino, anywhere along there. And if you're very lucky, you might see a gray whale passing. They're heading north up to Alaska, where they'll be feeding all summer before they turn around and head back to Baja, where they spend their winters. It's kind of a nice lifestyle, I guess, where their babies are born during the winter months in these warm birthing lagoons on the western side of Baja California. Typically, I have this picture because, well, hop back a second. Typically, what you get to see is something like this. It's pretty exciting. When I went to the Monterey Bay Aquarium website to get a few details about the gray whales, they were very, very excited because a gray whale and its baby had come into the Monterey Bay, and this is pretty much what you could see. It was 2 years ago that I had the great privilege of traveling with Lindblad expeditions and on a National Geographic ship down in Baja, where our experience was more like this with the gray whales. It was one of the most moving and magnificent things that I have ever experienced. Being in the ocean in a very small little rubber boat that was about, maybe a third as big as a mother whale and about half as big as a baby whale. And it really put things into a wonderful perspective. But anyway, let me see, what's the next picture, Ariel? Oh, there's a baby and its mother. The babies are about 17 feet long when they're born. And they drink about 50 gallons of milk a day, so they grow pretty rapidly. And by the end of February, beginning of March, they're ready to travel with their mothers back up to to Alaska. This is the little red dot shows, this is, I did Google Maps. This shows where the Magdalena Bay was, where we went to see the whales. There's an interesting backstory, of course. You know, the whales have been following this pattern for, who knows, eons, I suppose, traveling up and down the coast of California until 1850, when the whalers discovered these populations of whales in these sheltered lagoons, where until then it had been a very safe place to for them to go. In the nice warm waters, the babies were born, everyone was protected, until of course the whalers discovered them. And then they were just trapped, as it were, almost in pens, and they proceeded to slaughter as many as they could. The mother whales were so ferocious in their in trying to protect their babies that they got this reputation of being the devilfish, is what they were called. And within 10 years, they very nearly exterminated all the whales. Then it was no longer profitable, so the whalers moved on to someplace else, and slowly the population started to come back until the early 20th century, when new technology made them look again at slaughtering the whales. And for the second time, they almost brought the gray whales to the brink of extinction. Wasn't until the 1970s, really, the late 60s, 70s, the Back to Nature movement became really committed to protecting the whales. And by this point, Mexico had closed off the lagoons, obviously for whaling and even for tourism. They were trying to protect and help the whales make a comeback. In 2018, I got a very interesting invitation to sail with Lindblad expeditions to the Galapagos, and I learned a little more about Lindblad. They are just, as far as I can tell, a fabulous expedition organization. They like to call their trips expeditions rather than cruises. They have a partnership with National Geographic, so when you sail with them, you sail with scientists, researchers, and of course the fabulous National Geographic photographers. I should mention here that most of the pictures I'm going to be showing actually were taken by the National Geographic photographers, not me. I have a couple of my own slipped in here, not too many. But I was so impressed at seeing the way the Lindblad expeditions travel, because they're very they travel with a real high degree of conscientiousness about the places they're visiting. Sven Lindblad, the founder, wants people to experience the wonders of the world, but not at a cost to these places. And so they are very environmentally conscious, and they're also very committed to sort of giving back to the community. So as I saw, like in the Galapagos, they have partnerships with schools, they support the artists, they bring scientists from the Galapagos on board to talk. It was really a magnificent experience. And then a couple of months later, that's when I got another invitation saying they were going to go to Baja, and did I want to come on this trip? It was a little different, because for the first time, this was in 2018, we would be going in 2019, Mexico had decided to open up these lagoons again for tourists to come and see and experience the whales. They felt it would be safe. And Sven Lindblad was one of the people whom they invited, trusting enough that he would be, they knew his reputation, that knew that whatever he did would be putting the whales in the ocean and the people of this area first, and thereby providing a great experience for his travelers as well. So what he did is he invited about 20 or so people, a few writers, a couple of travel agents, some scientists, some people from conservation organizations in Latin America, to all sail together on the National Geographic ship, the Sea Bird, and to go out, and as he was mapping out what kind of a trip he would plan, and to provide feedback. So the question to me was, would you like to go? And I said, well, yes, of course. So off we went. We went to, get the next picture. That's Baja. This is a little bit of a better picture showing the lagoon, so you can see how they would have been so vulnerable to whalers who would sail in here and then slaughter them. But to get to the Magdalena Bay, it's a very remote part of Baja, this very low population, and some fishermen, a couple of little towns, not much. We flew from Los Angeles into the town of Laredo, which is on the eastern side of Baja, on the Sea of Cortez. It's in itself, it's a very cool little town. They're building some resorts there, but it still has the feel of a little Mexican town with a long history. And it's a place I would really like to go back to and spend more time in. There's one flight a day from Los Angeles to Laredo on Alaska Air, one flight out and one flight in. So we flew into Laredo, and then we got on a bus for about a 5-hour bus ride over the mountains of Baja and down to the ocean, where this was our ship that was waiting for us. This is the Sea Bird. It's one of the older National Geographic ships. It carries about 62 passengers. So these expeditions with Lindblad National Geographic are, I guess you could call them intimate. They're nothing like the giant cruise experiences. And this would be our home for a week while we explored around the Magdalena Bay, although the ship would just drop anchor and we would travel out in the little rubber Zodiacs. So the next morning, we set out in small groups in our little Zodiacs. And pretty much this is the landscape we saw. It's stunningly beautiful, but very it still feels quite wild and empty of people. Although we began to see right away the marks of people having passed through, mostly with the plastic debris in the ocean. But I'll get to that later. This is a shot of one of the photographers captured this of a whale, but it also shows this sort of striking background of Baja. The sand dunes were just magnificent. A few times we went ashore and explored around, and you could feel like no one had ever been there before until you found plastic debris. And we all became great collectors of plastic. We'd carry it all back to the ship, and then Sven was going to dispose of it someplace. Anyway, then so we had sailed when all of a sudden we began to see these signs of whales. First, in the distance, you might see the water breaking. You might see a spout of a whale. So we knew we were out in the ocean with the whales. We just hadn't gotten very close to them yet. At this point, you can see people are already very excited about the prospect of even just seeing a whale. And then, of course, as the whales came closer, people could reach out and actually touch them. And if you ever want to see people sophisticated, people reduced to just, completely excited kids, it's, put them in a little Zodiac like this and have a whale come up and close enough that you can reach out and touch it, and it just reduces everybody to just sort of like, well, hard to describe, but they're fun to watch as you see people just falling overboard practically trying to touch a whale. It was neat to see that experience the curiosity of the whales towards the humans. I mean, the humans fell in love. The whales were curious, and I found myself thinking, isn't it interesting that they're also so forgiving? I mean, obviously, nobody said, well, remember what they did 150 years ago, and be careful of these strange creatures in boats. Especially the babies. They were so curious, and they would come up to the boats and they would be playful. They would go underneath the boats, and of course they could just knock us all into the water in an instant. They would go around the boats, but they stayed close to their mothers. And if the mother decided no, she didn't want the baby hanging out with the humans any longer, somehow that baby knew, and they would go off by themselves. It was just very, very, it was just an absolutely magical interaction. In one area, we mostly saw whales doing this. It's an interesting thing called spy hopping, I learned, where they just shoot nose first straight up into the air. And generally, one of the scientists told me, this is a behavior that is you're more likely to see from the males, and the especially younger males. The way he put it was, the mothers are up in the northernmost sheltered parts of the bay, taking care of their babies, feeding their babies, looking out for them, making sure they don't, get into any kind of trouble. The babies kind of crawl over, well, they don't crawl really, they sort of float over their mothers and hang on to their mothers. And it's charming. Meanwhile, the males are down in another part in what this scientist called a sort of like a nightclub, just having fun, showing off, spy hopping, shooting up out of the air, just, being kind of typical males. So, but this too is just a very, very exciting sight to see while they're discoing or whatever they're doing. And of course, this is when they really want to show off for you. They will spout. And so we spent our days out in these zodiacs. We would get up, have breakfast together in a communal dining room, back when you could do things like that. In a time of COVID, it's something to look at all these people crowded together on a little boat. Obviously, Lindblad had to stop all of its expeditions, which they did last spring. And I wonder if the whales wondered where everybody was. But anyway, we would go out, we would look around, see the whales, go back and have lunch. Absolutely everybody on this complete sort of John Denver, Rocky Mountain high of spending a morning with the whales. In the afternoon, we tried some different other activities. Some of the crazier people would do the paddle boarding. One time we went off kayaking into some of the little byways close to shore, looking at birds. And then in the evening after dinner, we would sit and listen to the naturalists talk, but also give feedback on what was the most, what were the best activities that they could plan if they're planning out a rich itinerary. Another thing that Sven did is he brought people on board the ship. One night there were some musicians. They made a big effort to cook and serve the local food on the ship, which was fun. And just to get a sense of the people who were essentially our hosts, along with the whales who were constantly keeping us well, entertained and educated. This is one woman who had a particularly moving encounter with a whale. And you can see here the gray whales, they're really, they carry a lot of barnacles on them. And you can tell the babies, obviously don't have as many barnacles, but it's one of the things about them. But I think I really like this picture just because it just shows this extraordinary interaction you can have with these creatures, completely nonverbal. Although I remember there was one woman who was from Ecuador, and she insisted that she could attract the whales to her zodiac by singing to them. And she would stand on the zodiac and sing Frank Sinatra songs and Dean Martin's songs. And she insisted that this is what the whales really loved. We never got particular feedback from the whales as to whether that was true or not, but she was sure of it. And this is just another extraordinary shot from a National Geo photographer who had his camera part underwater, so you could see how the whale is just coming up to greet people, I guess, and causing people to almost fall overboard. There were, of course, other creatures that we encountered in our trips. We saw dolphins, lots of seabirds, and then, of course, the wonderful sea lions, who are just as, who are again friendly and curious about the people. And it was a sea lion actually that taught us provided one of the most poignant experiences in the whole trip, because we were out in a zodiac one morning, and a little sea lion like this all of a sudden popped his head up, and he was leaning on the edge of the zodiac looking at us, and we thought, isn't this the cutest thing? He's come to say good morning. And then we realized that he had some plastic entangled around his neck, and it was cutting into his neck, and it was just this terrible, sobering moment where we all realized that he'd been caught in some plastic floating in the water or something. And one of the people on the Zodiac was a doctor, and so we were saying, is there anything we can do? And he said, unfortunately, there isn't. He's still a wild creature. And this was reiterated that evening when we were talking about it. The little whale the little sea lion. In our view, he was saying, "Can you help me?" Because he was a juvenile, which meant as he grew larger, the plastic was going to choke and kill him. And yet there was nothing that we could do. But we talked about it at some length with Sven, because he said, they had incidents before when trained people with veterinarian background had tried to help a sea lion. And also you realize they're wild creatures. We couldn't just pull him on board and cut the plastic off his neck. So it just really brought home to all of us the dangers, the hazards, the tragedy of plastic in the oceans, all kind of symbolized by this one little dim sea lion. It was quite a moving experience, and came back, and my daughter and I just decided that's it. We are not going to use plastic ever again for the sake of that little sea lion. Mm-hmm. And that's quite a challenge in this day and age to go without plastic. But that was the story of the sea lion. I have a few more shots here of the beautiful sunsets we saw down in Baja. Just utterly stunning vistas of sea and sky and color. This is from shore looking out to the Sea Bird. Our boat, the Sea Bird. And I think you can see how we were so privileged to be the one boat out there. Towards the end of the week, other boats were coming out onto the water in certain areas as they try to figure out how to open up tourism. There were some motorboats. There were some very enthusiastic people trying to zoom around and find whales. My own experience, my own observation is that the whales seem to like the little quiet rubber zodiacs better than noisy, fast motorboats, but that could just be my prejudice. This is another shot. We one evening had a barbecue out on shore, and people were transported from the Sea Bird, which you can see in the distance, by the little zodiacs to the shore, and we could again just get a sense of the vast and beautiful wildness of Baja down in this particular region. And another shot, another sunset shot. This is one of the great things about sailing with these expeditions. When you've got National Geographic photographers on board, they will give lessons, and you can do sessions with them, and they will come back and they'll evaluate your pictures and give you tips, and you can learn a great deal. Even I shot some of my pictures with an iPhone, and they said perfectly possible to get great photos with your iPhone. But of course, they were carrying fantastic equipment and to capture scenes like this one. And this is just one last shot of a photographer taking this image of the lone ship at sea and all the vastness of Baja. I just was talking to the people from Lindblad and found out that they're very excited that as of next summer, this coming summer of 2021, they believe they're going to be able to begin making expeditions again, going to Alaska, Japan, and to the Galapagos, and possibly other places, just depending on how the coronavirus is contained and how safe it is to travel aboard ships and to go into foreign airports and foreign countries. And that's why I just included one last shot of my favorite creatures that I met in the Galapagos. This is the Blue-Footed Boobie. It is worth going to the Galapagos just to see this funny little creature who has these great big blue feet and dances. And they do a mating dance, the Blue-Footed Boobies, which is just a priceless thing to see. And so that was my experience of sailing into the lagoons, learning about the whales, meeting sea lions, deciding never to use plastic again if I could avoid it, and seeing how people are looking ahead to say, how can we still, as fellow travelers, enjoy all these wild wonders on this planet, but protect them at the same time. So that is about all I have to say. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Are you there, Constance?
Yes, I'm here. I'm coming back in. Yes. Well, thank you. Those are beautiful pictures, just amazing.
Oh my God. I mean, I had so many. I could have gotten carried away, except I didn't want to drive Ariel crazy and send her 300 pictures. So I just had to choose. I just had to choose a few, but I just loved the way the photographers were able to capture the very wild excitement of people on the Zodiacs. I'm still amazed, that none of us fell overboard, because it was a near thing quite a few times.
If anybody has any questions, they can feel free to write them in the chat, in the question and answer box on down at the bottom of the screen. Just feel to type them in. I have a question. I was wondering, did you get to pet or touch a whale yourself?
I did.
And how did they feel?
It's the skin is very rough because of the barnacles. So this must have been a mother whale, because she had barnacles. So you just kind of just touch them, and I don't know. It's just, I guess it was like the closest you could come to shaking hands with them and saying, nice to meet you.
Mhm.
For the most part, I tended to not want to get in the way of someone who is absolutely determined to pat the whale. So, because people would very much say, there's a whale, and everybody would go to that side of the zodiac. And so my instinct was to stay on the other side, figuring I'm going to balance it out, and I'm going to sit over here and not flip the whole thing over. And so that's how it came about, that I was sitting on this side, and all of a sudden there was a whale. And whether she came up from underneath or whatever, they're sort of there and gone. They don't stick around too much. But they certainly are absolutely fascinating. And I would give anything to know what they think of humans and what they were thinking about these goofy people. But that's another language to learn, Ariel. The language of whales.
Yes, whales.
Yes. And so it's Sven, he's going to do more going down to Baja again? Did you
Now they've become a regular an expedition that people can sign up for. They have a website, so now they are regular expeditions, and I think they tend to take place January to March, because of course that's when the whales are there. By the beginning of March, you're going to see fewer whales because they're heading up towards Mendocino and Bodega Bay. And but it really was extraordinary, because I was thinking back to the times when I'd been up in Mendocino, and you could look far out to sea and see that gray streak of the whales passing through.
Yeah.
And so we really got to see them up close.
Yeah, what an amazing trip.
Yeah, I was just completely honored to be invited to go along on that. And participate. So let me see if I can get back to a whale picture as a sort of a parting shot. There's this first one is one of sort of a favorite of everybody's. This the eye of the whale. I don't know how the photographer got that one, but it looks like a very wise and knowing eye. So anyway, I would highly recommend the trip if you ever have a chance to travel with Lindblad. They're more expensive, but I would just do it in a heartbeat.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing your trip with us, and for joining us. And I do want to remind everybody that next month's Remarkable Journey will be Explore Antarctica with John Komitsky. Hopefully I'm saying his name correctly. And that will be April 15th. So the third Thursday in April from 7 to 8. So we hope to see everybody next month also. And I think if there's no other questions, then I think we can wrap this up. And thank you again for joining us. And thank you, Sasha, for sharing your journey with us. It was remarkable. Like how I tied that in.
You were so patient setting this all up, and thank you again to Ariel.
Yes, and thank you, Ariel, for helping us.
Kind of the Constance and Ariel show, really.
So good night, everybody.
Okay, good night and thank you.
Thank you.